Hello everyone. This is a live video that we're doing for Hanging by a Thread, the book that we're studying for Lent, and it is Friday morning, March 8th. Happy International Women's Day. I want to give a special Happy International Women's Day to women who have made my journey a lot easier. My mother, my sister, my wife, obviously. But also women that I've known in the church who I look up to, Amy Richter, Carol Pinkham Oak, Jen Redall, others who have been mentors and just, good people in my life. So we still have some work to do in terms of equality and against violence against women. So we better get on that, and it's up to us men to do that. So, in honor of International Women's Day, I've got some Dar Williams on, and it's a song that is from the Green World album called After All, and it's a story song. It doesn't really tell a story, but it talks about telling a story of truth. And that's where we talk about this book, Hanging by a Thread. The second chapter, really the first chapter after the introduction, is about story. And the author, Samuel Wells, talks about the story of the cross and the power that it has. So if I asked you, tell me a story of your life, you might tell the story in a certain way. You might tell it from your perspective. You might make yourself out to be the hero. You might paint yourself in a more self-deprecating light. And then if we ask someone else who's in that story to tell it from their perspective, they're going to tell it from their own point of view. And they're going to tell it the way that they remember it, and maybe with different shades of personality to make them look better or make you look worse. And it's not all about that, but there are different truths to be told out there, right? And Samuel Wells in this book talks about the ways in which we tell the story of the cross and the troubles that come from those. And the three manifestations of what he talks about when the story meets history are moral, factual, and then philosophical. I really didn't understand this part of the book. I don't think it was that well written. The chapter's like 5 pages. I mean, expand a little bit, buddy. So the moral part of it is kind of how we paint the ethics of the story, and how the story is told in terms of what it does for other people. I think that's what I get from it anyway. He talks about how sometimes when we tell the story of the Passion, the Jews are erased from that history, which leads to anti-Semitism. And I don't want to say erased, but put as the villains, right? And you can tell the story that way. I'm not sure what good it does. I'm not sure that it's factual in any way, but obviously Christians have been telling that story for centuries, and I don't think it's the right way to tell the story. Anyway, that's the moral aspect of telling a story. The factual story. So, a wonderful book that another group of parishioners is studying here called The Last Week by Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan. I recommend this to anyone who wants a more factual look at what the week of the Passion was like for Jesus and what it meant. Now, obviously, Borg and Crossan come at it from their own perspective. Doesn't mean that it's the right story. I happen to subscribe to it, though. I think it makes a lot of really good points. For example, when we think of Palm Sunday, what's the story? The story is that Jesus came into Jerusalem and people waved their palms at him and laid down their coats to welcome him into Jerusalem. And I think from a Christian perspective, we kind of imagine that to be, all right, they're welcoming the king, right? But what Crossan and Borg talk about is what it may have meant at the time was pure political theater, right? Think recently like that congressman who brought in an African-American staffer to stand in back of him and say, it can't be racism because we have this black person here. Political theater, right? So the idea that you're doing something for show to prove a point. what Jesus did, and I'm just giving you one example that this book brings out. When Jesus came into Jerusalem, he came in from the east side, right? Whereas Pilate, the governor, was coming in from the west side, from Caesarea Antipas, where the emperor lived. And so it was a royal procession from the west with chariots and horses and spears and might and pomp and circumstance. And then Jesus does the exact opposite, very humbly coming in from the east, like the sun rising, and then coming in on a donkey, very humbly with the poor people. So it's not just done because, oh, the prophet said that it was supposed to be done this way. No, it's done for other reasons. And you got to know the whole story, right? So factual, I think, held a little bit more water for me. A final aspect or manifestation of story/history in this chapter is philosophical. The idea that the event of the cross could change all human history, right? I mean, that's a lot for people to imagine. It really is. And the idea that this event meant so much and changed everything, that really makes you question what it all means, because you don't want to get it wrong, right? If it's a cosmic issue, you don't want to get it wrong. There, now I feel taller. So, again, the philosophical manifestation, I think we all wrestle with that without knowing about it. We might call it existential. We might have other words for it. That really didn't do a whole lot for me, because for me, it all kind of comes back to factual. Like, for example, if we get up to heaven, or let's say we die, and we realize that it's a big spaghetti monster God, and it's not the loving God that we've all been preaching, we've all been wrong all these years, does that make the crucifixion any less powerful for our lives? So I guess where I back up from it all is to say, our story, not only as Christians, but as humans, I believe is one of life and death and life. Right? It's a continual cycle that even the Near Eastern first people understood in the cycles of the crops, that, the sun comes up and the sun comes down and the sun comes up again. The crops, are born, they rise up, and then they fall, and then they rise up again. It's a cycle of life. And so I think that's the power for me that gets brought out in cinema, it gets brought out in movies, in television. The resurrection, like the person who's beaten down but then somehow gets new life. I mean, it's Star Wars, it's Rocky too. I mean, it's all that stuff. So that is not the self-giving and resurrection. It's I'd say it's God's story, but it's also our story, right? And how do we live into that story? Final line that he wrote, which I really didn't get, and maybe y'all can explain it to me. But he wrote, when we face the moment of truth, we come face to face with the cross. Okay. I got to sit with that for a bit, because it just seems like he's doing what preachers do sometimes, which is just say things that sound good but don't really make a lot of sense. I don't know what he means by that. And I'm not really taking it out of context, because I really didn't understand the context either. Again, I think so far, this is the book. It's super duper thin. And I kind of wish that he could expand on some of his thoughts and ideas. So I think maybe he's asking us to do that, so we get to do it. Yay for us. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that stuff on Sunday between services in the parish hall or somewhere. We'll find a spot to meet. I'll announce it on Sunday. But give me a shout on Facebook from this video, or a comment. Send me an email. Let me know what you think. It's fun just to kind of take notes and then talk with you about it. But it needs to be a two-way conversation at best. So, all right. Taking you out with John Lennon's Instant Karma. Heard it on the drive-in this morning, and This kind of reminds us that we all shine on, women and men, Christians, atheists, Jews, Greeks, we all shine on. So, and the reason I'm doing this early, it was going to be at 9 o'clock, and I apologize for those of you who are going to tune in then, but I have a 9:30 coffee meeting, and I'll make sure that this is on the calendar from this point on, because I know a lot of you plan your mornings around this, right? All right, we out. Thanks a lot.